is a criminal felony punishable under the U.S. Federal Criminal Code. The previous U.S. administration at that time was not convinced to ban it, and with the advent of the Obama administration, well, they said that they are going not to use it. However, if they used it, we didn't see or we didn't heard so far of about any soldier or commander of a government official to be prosecuted because of torture. And another consequence that affected also, the situation here, and a lot of NGO really who care about human rights. A lot of citizens were really affected by this creation of, first of all, Guantanamo Bay camp, and also by the creation of the enemy combatant status instead of the prisoner of war status. And those are not something that you say, oh, it affects only American, it doesn't affect us. Well, you see, we have a Canadian in Guantanamo Bay, and he's still there. I'm not sure what the Supreme Court today decided because I was traveling, so I'm not sure what they said, but I would be very much interested to hear what the Supreme Court here in Canada said about the case of Amar Kader regarding his repatriation here. So, but you see, we are still affected by this debate of what are we going to do with people who are caught in the war on terror? Should we keep them indefinitely in detention? Should we rehabilitate them? Should we give them the same right as other people? So these are things that were not discussed before, and I think we should be thinking and talking and discussing these issues. Another tool used in this context of national security is what we call the extraordinary rendition. My husband was a victim of this American policy. This new technique developed by the CIA means that individuals, presumably terror suspects, can be seized anywhere in the world and sent off without even a nod in the direction of due process. Last week, 23 CIA agents were charged in Italy by an Italian judge of participating into an extraordinary rendition. And that's something actually that the New York Times praised. It shows how we were able, how some governments were able to distance themselves from what happened, especially in the United States, and from this, very ill-conceived procedure called extraordinary rendition. So this is, I think, a step in the good direction. But it's only a judge in Italy. We don't know whether those people are going really to be brought into the Italian system, justice system, or not. But it's still something that happened, and I think it's good. But it's only about one case. And when we know that there are apparently hundreds of cases of people who are victims of such a procedure, we wonder, who is the other country who would be able to speak about that and to bring people into court and judge them if they have participated in such a procedure. So, you see, my husband's case was, I think, the tip of an iceberg when it comes to extraordinary rendition. For example, there is an CIA agent, who told the New York Times that between 100 and 150 terror suspects have been captured and sent to jail in foreign lands, such as Egypt, Pakistan, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria. All of these countries are identified by the State Department as torture states. But at the same time, they have been used to detain people and to torture them and to keep them indefinitely in those prisons. CIA agent Bob Bayer, he's a former agent, he said If you want a serious interrogation, you send the prisoner to Jordan. If you want them to be tortured, you send them to Syria. If you want someone to disappear, never to see them again, you send them to Egypt. So these are not things like it was. They have really a procedure. And we are not just here speculating or guessing. The damage to civil liberties. One of the very consequences of the war on terror is the damage caused to our civil liberties. Unfortunately, this damage to our freedoms and liberties occurred with the willing support of many of our politicians, who believed that Canada needed a draconian anti-terrorism legislation to fight the terrorist threat that was facing us. So under the name of national security, many controversial and dangerous laws or acts were passed. And I think it is really time to think and reflect about these measures and whether, first of all, to know them, because a lot of people do not know them, and second, to examine their efficiency and to see whether we need them, whether they are right, whether they affect our civil liberties, and whether they can be changed to make us feel safer without at the same time feel threatened in our rights and our freedoms. There are also consequences, like social consequences. So those consequences have directly affected law-abiding people across the country that happen to share the ethnicity or the religion of the people who carried the 9/11 attacks. They have resulted in many people being arrested, detained, and denied the right to due process. The Muslim and Arab communities are the group mainly targeted by the war on terror. Within this group, suspicion, fear, trauma are very common and widespread. Inside those communities, women are most of the time the victims, suffering in silence if their husband or loved one are caught in the war on terror. They lack the support from the other member of the community. They don't have the financial, social resources or network to speak out and to defend their rights. The fear created a policy of silence and trauma that very dare, to reverse. And of course, these are just consequences on the local and national level, but there are also geopolitical consequences of the war on terror. Many countries around the world, and especially oppressive regimes, are now unjustly using the war on terror as a reason to throw opponents in prisons. Many political opponents were labeled as terrorists, and many legitimate reformers and opposition supporters are kept indefinitely in prison, tortured, and sometimes killed. There is this example, I found it the book by Maureen Webb. She was mentioning this example of a librarian of a government in Africa who arrested the editor of one of Liberia's independent newspaper. He was held incommunicado and tried before a military court as an enemy combatant. So we use the same terminology as the American started using it with Guantanamo Bay camp. So those incidents that happen in the United States and here in Canada are not really isolated from the rest of the world. So there are people and government who are just finding in this war on terror excuses to get rid of their opponents and under the disguise of war on terror. And there are many other examples. I can, mention many of them, using the same kind of reasons to just get rid of opponents. So in Canada, we have, for example, adapted our national security policy to work better with the American agencies. We have also increased our border security. We have gone so far to develop a no-fly list that is based on the American model. This list was developed in close cooperation with various American security agencies. We have done a great deal both in terms of spending, restructuring, communicating with our security partners. I think it is time to carefully examine this national security policy, our relationship with our partners, and our laws. So